And our base scripture last week, and we ended up titling it Worthy of Me, because our base scripture last week was Matthew chapter 10, verse 37 through 39, where it says, "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And then he who does not take up his own cross and follow after me is not worthy of me." And we had discussed that that particular word worthy is axios in the Greek, and we'll come back to it in a moment. And it just simply refers to equal balance on a scale. And we showed you the old-timey vintage scales where they could tip either way as the example. Okay? So keep that in mind as we pick up where we left off from last week. But I ask you as we begin, we know that when we say that Jesus had disciples, we automatically assume the 12 disciples. But you realize he had other disciples beyond that. Because Luke chapter 10 said he sent out 70 others. And the Emmaus two referred to themselves as disciples. You had the women in Luke chapter 8 and verse 3. You had all the different Marys. There must have been 3 or 4 different ladies named Mary that you see in the account of the resurrection. Then you had Joanna and Susanna, and you had Salome and different ones, Mary Magdalene obviously, that were all part of a group that followed him. So they were disciples. And disciples just simply is mathetes in the Greek, M-A-T-H, just like math, E-T-E-S. And it means a student, a pupil, a learner. Someone who's like in a classroom. Although they didn't have actual classrooms like we do now, or for a Bible study like we have here in the sanctuary. And we have had them in classrooms before. But in any case, that's all a disciple means. So he called many people to be disciples. And what made the 12 disciples the 12 disciples? What made them, what was the criteria for them to meet the selection process? And we're going to show you where Jesus actually had to pray about narrowing it down. We're going to show you in the Word where he had many disciples to choose from, many whom he had already called to come and follow him. And from that group, he had to narrow it down to 12. It wasn't a matter of him picking 12 and they going and then other people start following along. You know, you sort of got that, Rocky 2 image where Rocky started jogging down the road by himself. And next thing you know, you got some kids. And then by the time the end of his run, you got a whole passel of kids following. That's not what we're talking about here. Jesus called many to come and follow me. And then he had to narrow it down. The biblical account shows specifically Matthew and Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, and ones like that. Well, what was the criteria that Jesus used in choosing the 12? What was it not necessarily so special about them, but what is it that qualified them, if I should say? And first of all, let's say they met the cost of discipleship. We used that phrase last week. And I really don't believe that we understand the cost of discipleship. Because religion has watered things down and has taken Ephesians chapter 2, 8, 9, and 10, where, okay, you just believe on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ, you believe that God raised him from the dead and you're saved. And we explain the difference between that kind of belief, which is standing next to the stool, and the actual pistuo faith, where you get to sit on the stool and pick your feet up and entrust your entire spiritual well-being, or in this case, my physical well-being, to the stool. Okay? So we talked about that in terms of a difference, but see, religion has watered it down, which gives us reason to believe there's many people in the church who are just enlightened. They're not genuinely born again. And even if they are born again, are they just followers? Or are they disciples? Now, you can go into a textbook definition and you can Google it, the difference between a follower and a disciple, but let's just bring it down to home here in our day and age. A follower is a fan, period. And you, just like you follow on social media. I mean, if you pull up somebody on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram and you see somebody there and you see like what you see, you want to continue to hear more posts from them, you'll click follow so you can see their post. We have people who do that with our YouTube channel. So every time we post one, it pops up because they are a follower of the YouTube channel at Kingdom Kratos Ecclesia Incorporated. So that is fandom. That is a follower. But how many are actual disciples? How many are actual students and learners? Well, then beyond that, how many of them are actual apostles? Because you know it refers to the disciples as apostles. Many people assume that that didn't kick in until after Pentecost in the book of Acts, because that's when you see them referred to predominantly as apostles. But they were called apostles from the get-go. And we're going to show you that here. In Matthew chapter 4 is where we begin. Then we go to Luke chapter 5 and then Luke chapter 6. In Matthew 4:18 it says, "Now as Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter," because in John 1 we see where he had already met him. He had been introduced by his brother Andrew, and he immediately renamed him Peter. "And Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen." Okay, now, we know when he gets into Peter's boat that he asked him to launch out into the deep and then cast your nets. Peter only cast out one, and it was in abundance, but he told him to cast out into the deep. So here it says they were casting a net into the sea. Why would they be casting a net in shallow water? To catch bait. To catch bait for that night. Okay? Meanwhile, he said to them, "Follow me and I will make you fishers of men." More on that in just a moment. Immediately, which means at once, they left their nets. And that word left is aphiemi. It's the same word for forgive. Forgive means to release, to let go. They had their nets in hand from where they were casting. Those of you who have been shrimping and you've been throwing a shrimp net, it's no different. You got the net in hand and you're fixing to throw that shrimp net, and all of a sudden you get called. And you have to literally drop what you're doing. That's what they did. They dropped what were doing and followed him. They left their income. They left their job and their source of income, if you will. They left their career. We're not saying anybody has to quit their job. No. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, in the boat with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. So they were all part of a fishing enterprise, because it'll see in Luke chapter 5 where they have to call their partners. So you got Zebedee probably showing his boys, let me show you I taught Peter this a long time ago, but let me show y'all how to mend a net. Okay? These got holes in this net. Let me show y'all how to sew. So he's teaching them how to sew, if you will. And it says here, and he called them. Immediately they left their boat and their father. Remember we talked last week in Matthew 10. Whoever's not willing or loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Well, that's what impressed Jesus here, is because they initially showed a love and a preference for Jesus than they did their own daddy. So it says, immediately left the boat and their father and followed him. They left what they possessed, they left what they had invested in, and they left their daddy. And Mark 1:20, immediately he called them and they left their father in the boat with the hired servants. So Mark makes a point and said they left him right in the boat. they just left him right there in the boat. They didn't even help him out the boat. They left him right there in the boat along with the hired servants. So they left him with somebody, but nonetheless they left him. Daddy, we got to go. Okay? We ain't going to wait till the guy gets way down the beach. We may lose him. We got to go right now. Flip over to Luke 5. Now, keep in mind, we're already in the section in the chapter where Jesus wielded kingdom dominion, where he said, fish, come into Peter's net. And it came in such abundance that it says his net was full. So full that it was about to break. That word full is pleroio. It literally means to cram full as in a net. Okay? It has roots in this story. To abundantly supply, satisfy, and verify. To fill to completion. Even when Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to pleroio it. To fulfill it to its max. To fill something to its maximum. So that's the context here. And it says, so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. That's where we get the partnership, the fishing enterprise from. And Jesus said to Simon, do not fear, from now on you will be catching men. And what that word means in the Greek, zogreo, means you will catch people alive. Now, that meant something to them because obviously they didn't go along the seashore picking up dead fish. They didn't do that. They actually threw the nets out to catch live fish. So he says, just like you're catching live fish and in such abundance that it's a net-breaking, boat-sinking, play royo fullness, he says, in that context, I'm calling you to catch men alive and to catch men and bring them into life. And it will be in that same measure. And sure enough, it's fulfilled on the day of Pentecost when Peter preaches and 3,000 people come into the kingdom. I doubt seriously there were 3,000 fish in that net because it was only so big. I mean, in John chapter 21, when he fills their net, there were only 153 large fish, the word says. So Jesus is taking, okay, say for instance, there's a couple of hundred fish in those nets, and the weight of those couple of hundred fish is so much that it's about to sink your little fishing boat, okay? Your little canoe, or whatever you want to call it, because those boats weren't that big, okay? They were big enough for Jesus to sleep in the stern, but they weren't like a yacht, all right? And it says, when they had brought their boats to land, they left everything and followed him. They left everything and followed him. Why? Because he said, follow me, and he says, from now on you will be catching men, and it means to catch people alive. Ironically, that word for catching, and he uses in catch people alive, is also used in 2 Timothy 2:26. And it speaks of how people have been taken captive by the devil. The devil is going to try to catch people alive and bring them down. Jesus is catching people alive and bring them into life. Now, and it says they left everything and followed him. That word for follow is okulotheo in the Greek. And it means path joining. Come join me on my path and follow my example and follow the example that I'm set, mimicking the example that I'm putting before you. Now you go on to Luke 5:27. He went out and noticed a tax collector named Levi, Matthew, sitting in the tax booth and said to him, follow me. And he left everything behind. He left his badge, he left his money box, he left everything that he had, maybe a royal robe or cloak or uniform he had to show he was a tax collector. He left it all. He left everything right there and followed him and got up and began to follow him. And not only that, it says, and Levi gave a big reception for him in his house. Levi wasn't throwing a party because he's celebrating his retirement, because it says the reception was for him. He invited his other cronies. He invited his other people of the world, the tax collectors and sinners, because as soon as they meet and Jesus is seen eating with them by the religious people, then they give him a hard time about it. John 1:43, it says, the next day he purposed to go into Galilee, and he found Philip. And Jesus said to him, follow me. You see in John 1 where he calls Nathanael and others. Okay, the point I'm getting to is in Luke chapter 6. He calls many because there were other people that were fishing. There were other people along the way that he called to follow. So now he's got to narrow this process down. So in Luke chapter 6 and verse 12, it says, it was at this time that he went off to the mountain to pray, and he spent the whole night in prayer to God. So he's talking to his father, and he says, Father, you see all the people who've left everything to follow me. You see those who are just following me out of curiosity. You see those who have a heart to know more. I need to narrow it down. So who, I can only take about 12 with me every day for the sake of accommodations, so many going to a tent. He's probably thinking in his head how many he can logistically carry or be along with him on a daily basis. So he says, I got to narrow it down to 12. How did he do it? He spent the whole night praying. And it says, and when day came, he called his disciples to him. This word for call is prosphoneo. And it just simply means from a distance, summon them to come. I use the example, if you've got a ball coach after practice, he's got the offense over there practicing. You've got the defense over there practicing. You got others over there stretching or exercising. And he calls everybody in, come on in here. That's what Jesus is doing here. In Matthew 20:16, we've discussed before that he says, for many be called, but few chosen. Matthew 22:14, for many be called, but few are chosen. He's called a lot. Now he's got to narrow it down. Now this word called, many be called, but few are chosen, is a different Greek word, and is proskaleo. And it means to call to oneself. And it has the connotation that when I call you, I expect you to come and look me in the eye. It's no different than we were kids and we were playing out in the yard, and I'm sure you did the same thing with yours, and they're out there playing and running around and doing all kinds of stuff, and it's time for supper, and you call them, and they don't immediately come. Well, eventually when they do come, you tell them, say, look, when I call you, you come. Because when you call, the expectation is for them to come and look you in the eye. Yes, Mama, what do you want? What you need? Don't just blow me off. Come. And that's what the word he uses here. I'm expecting you to come. Now, he uses this whenever he needs to address a matter. This is a different kind of calling. This ain't just a gather on in here, huddle up type calling. No, he's calling to come here because he's got something important to tell you. He used that word when he called James and John because he says, look, I guess y'all put your mama up to coming to me and trying to ask me for a special favor for one of you to sit on my right, one of you on my left. You don't know what you're asking. But to call them to get that matter straightened out, he used this word. Now he uses this word because he's now got to narrow it down. Well, it says there in Luke chapter 6, it says he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also named as apostles. Immediately upon choosing and narrowing it down to 12, they were not just considered disciples, having met the cost of discipleship, but now they've been named apostles. Why? Because Jesus was sitting there thinking, of all those that I've called, these 12 will go. Because see, that's what apostle means, sent one. I'll call many, and they will come and be students. They will sit there and listen to the parables. But when they get finished listening to the parables, when they get finished taking notes, as y'all are doing, when they get finished listening to a Bible study, as y'all are doing, then he says, okay, they just go on back home. They're disciples. You've got the followers who come just out of curiosity. The religious people, they were coming just to scrutinize. So you have many people who follow out of curiosity. But now he's got disciples who are willing to sit there and listen and hang around for the explanation of these parables. He says, but I need 12 that are willing to go. I need 12 that are willing to put into practice what they've been taught. Don't just be taught it and go back home until the next appointed session. He says, I'm looking for those who will actually apply what we're teaching. As we were talking about before, we're teaching on prayer. I need those who are willing to apply it. Not just take notes and have it theologically as part of your understanding as a we need to, but actually put it to work. And he knew these 12 would go. And he says they were Simon, who's also named Peter, and Andrew his brother. There's 2. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, there's 4. Philip and Bartholomew, there's 6. Matthew and Thomas, that's 8. James, the son of Alphaeus, and Simon the Zealot, that's 10. Jude, the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. There's your 12. So he calls a larger group of mathetes, students, learners, pupils, Why? Because they first met the cost of discipleship. They were willing to sacrifice, leave daddy in the boat, leave the tax business that was very profitable to come and be a disciple. But so did others leave things. But among those who were willing to leave something to follow and be a disciple, I need those who are willing to go, who are willing to apply what they get taught. It's one thing to be in the classroom, it's another thing to go out in the field and do what you've been taught in the classroom. And that's what he says I'm looking for here. And these 12 he knew would go. Now, if you're going to go, as we see in Luke chapter 9, Luke chapter 10, and Matthew chapter 10, he says, if you're going to go, you're going to go with my authority. So when you pray, you're going to pray with authority that I've taught you in the classroom. You go take those principles of how to pray with authority, and you're going to go pray for the sick. That's what you're going to go do. You hear the parables of the kingdom, you're going to go and teach the kingdom. You're not going to teach me, you go teach the kingdom. So those who are being willing to go must understand you're going with authority and for the express purpose of preaching the exact same message Jesus did. You're not preaching theology. And I had a chance to share with somebody the other day, because frequently not frequently, but periodically I'll get people who will call on me and they say, hey, can we meet for lunch, or can we meet for breakfast, or a cup of coffee, or whatever, because I need to just talk the word with you. And I had an opportunity to do that with somebody on Monday. So when they call me and they ask their questions, and we answer them and show them in the word the answers to their questions, well, I feel like because they called me, then that gives me the right to speak correction into their life if they're not saying something correctly, or they're not exactly doing something correctly. And this particular individual is very, very, very teachable. Very humble, very teachable. And this particular person used the phrase about sharing their faith and say, this is what I believe, in terms of talking about a certain subject in the Bible. I said, okay. I said, it's good that you're saying that, and I know you're saying that and you're saying it that way because you may be a little apprehensive, and that's why you're asking questions, because you want to make sure you know what you're saying before you go back to them. I understand that's why you asking questions. I said, so may I suggest this? I said, when you go, don't use the phrase, here's what I believe. I said, if you know that 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 you know, and you have a firm revelation of something. I said, you present it this way. This is what the word says. I said, if you are just now, you're learning and you're getting a grasp on this subject, and you know good and well, you haven't fully grasped it to be able to teach it with great authority, but yet you do have some revelation on the subject. I said, then at the very least, say it this way. This is what the Lord is showing me, and this is what I see in the Word. I said, because if you present it as, this is what I believe, I said, that makes it subject to dispute. And whereas you have revelation of the Word, but because you presented it that way, now they can come back and argue, especially if it's a theological matter. I said, you get revelation of the Word and you present it. This is what the Word says. And I said, and if it's something you haven't really 100% grasped, not that any of us ever get 100% revelation, but you get the point. I said, even if you feel like you only got about a 60% grasp on the subject, just at least present it. This is what the Word says, and this is what I see in the Word and what the Lord has shown me. I said, you're still presenting the Word. I said, but you're not presenting it as, this is what I believe. So if you're going to be sent, you got to go with that authority, and authority not just to pray with authority, but to speak with authority. Remember it says in Mark chapter 1, Luke chapter 4, and Matthew chapter 7, the last verse of Matthew 7, it says that they marveled at Jesus because he spoke with authority, not as the scribes. The scribes may have said, this is what we believe. Jesus says, this is what the Word says. And that's why they said he presents it with authority. He presents it as if he knows what he's talking about, and he did. So when you share, present it as you know what you're talking about. That's what we're saying here. Now, that right there will be the difference, or a difference, between being called and chosen. Because you see in Luke chapter 6, verses 13, 14, 15, that Jesus called those whom he had called. He called them together, and from those called, he chose 12 to be apostles. Now, when we say apostle, don't automatically think the fivefold ministry. Apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher, and say, well, I'm not called to be an apostle. I'm not called to, hit the road and go from one place to the other, building up a church. No, I'm not saying don't think of it in that way. Because every one of these parts of the fivefold ministry, you and I, all of us do, but there are those who are called to do that as a profession. They're called to do that as a calling, if you will. But all of us are called to be an apostle, in other words, for him to be able to send us out, to go visit the sick in the hospital, to go minister to somebody in a nursing home. I'm sure when y'all go to the nursing home to visit, or the assisted living facility, you don't just minister to your mom, you minister to other people in there too. So you got to be willing to call to do that. You got to be willing to go. That's being an apostle. That doesn't mean you go around and say, I'm apostle so-and-so. No. That's where religion takes it over. No. You're called to be an apostle. Well, when you're going out witnessing, you're called to evangelize. It doesn't mean you're called to be an evangelist and be the next Billy Graham. No. If you speak the word authoritatively and you are speaking the truth, you're prophesying. Doesn't necessarily mean you're a prophet. Okay? If you're helping somebody at work and you've got them, you are mentoring them, and they're like under your wing in terms of you're sharing the word with them in a Bible study at work, or you're just sharing devotionals with them or something like that. Well, you're shepherding them, so you're pastoring them. And then likewise, you're teaching them. So there's the fivefold ministry, but still, we can all be called to do the work. Paul even says, do the work of an evangelist. Okay? So we're called to do that. But the point I'm getting is this. You've got to first meet the cost of discipleship. And then you got to be willing to go. To be a disciple, you got to meet the cost of discipleship. You got to be willing to leave things behind. And then you got to be willing to go. And this example came to me, this reminder came to me, and I've used it last night, and I use it, I will use it again. I just used it for the first time, I think, last night. But I was reminded, the Lord reminded me of, during the 18 years I was at Agape as principal. It was in the early years, so it might have been my 4th or 5th year there. I can't remember what year it was. But along came the smartest student I've ever had. The smartest student, hands down. We got him in middle school. Through middle school and through high school, never made a B. Straight A's. I had the privilege of teaching the young man math, all levels of math. And literally, whenever he turned in a test paper, I could go over his first. Hardly ever anything was wrong. But I could use it as the scoring key to grade all the other students. Because I didn't even have to go through and do one myself. I could use his. It was that pristine. It was that perfect. Formulas, everything. Done exactly right. Every now and then he might have, made a mental mistake or something and made a 98 or 97 or something like that. But it still was, it was immaculate. Okay? Well, he showed us he was called to be a part of the private Christian school. Well, he showed us something. So we went to him and we chose him during his sophomore year. We called his parents in and we talked to them and we talked to him. And we said, look, we're not going to waste a year of your career. We want you, and you've been chosen to come to summer school and skip a grade. and go from sophomore to senior and graduate next year. I said, you can do it. But here's the cost. You got to come to summer school. You got to take these courses and spend your summer. You've got to leave all this other activities you normally been doing all these years during the summer. To go to the beach, go play. You've got to let go of all of that and come to be able to advance. And he did it. And he graduated valedictorian. Now, when he was a sophomore, there was already somebody who was a junior that was a provisional valedictorian. And that particular young lady went on to be a doctor. She was very brilliant too. So he does what it takes to be chosen for that. Now, that's how we chose him. Okay? He had already planned all along he was going in the army because his family had been serving in the army. So he goes in the army, and we hear reports back, a couple of years later, after having completed basic and, being sent here, sent there. We got notice that he had been chosen to go to West Point. And he was chosen to go to West Point, and he flourished at West Point. The Lord reminded me of this particular gentleman, and so I reached out to him in the last several days, and he responded. He's now a major. He's now a major because he excelled and met the cost of discipleship in high school, in the army, in whatever you call the basic training or whatever comes after that, his first assignment. And he said, pray for me. He said, because next month I got deployed again and I got to go to the Middle East. So he's constantly exhibited leadership skills whereby he was been chosen. That's what we're saying. Many be called, and you may respond to that calling and even meet the cost of discipleship. But some don't even meet the cost of discipleship, so therefore they're just a follower. They're a fan. And I am convinced that the cost of discipleship is much deeper, as we talked about last week, than what we realize. Because we got to leave in order to go. Well, we talked last week how John the Baptist began the subject in Matthew 3:8 and Luke 3:8, where he says, bring forth fruit that is meet for repentance. That's that same word, axios. If you've repented, you got to bring forth the fruit to meet it. So we're not going to major on that because we covered that last week. And then we talked about it again in Matthew chapter 10. If you love and show a love for father and mother, preferential treatment for them over me, you're not worthy of me. Axios. That doesn't balance the scale. Likewise, son or daughter, that doesn't balance the scale. If you love your own life and you're not willing to pick up your cross and follow me, that doesn't balance the scale. Now we go over to Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9. Many people will be willing to be disciples and even pay the cost of discipleship. Y'all know good and well it's sacrificial for y'all to be here at this time in the middle of the week. It's sacrificial because some of you just getting off work and hadn't had supper yet. Some of you can't make it on these Wednesday nights because you work and you have to work over. So I'm glad to see when you are here because you are sacrificing putting off supper. You're sacrificing going home and getting out the heat and relaxing in your recliner to come here. You're paying the cost of discipleship. And God sees it and you will be rewarded. But how many people aren't willing to do that? Now, among the disciples, who will go? Who will put into practice what you learn in Bible study? Okay, in Luke chapter 9, verse 59. What prevents somebody? What is the hang-up? There are many different hang-ups, and because you got many different people, and it may be a different hang-up for different people. And in Luke 9:59, it says, and Jesus said to another, follow me. Okay, well, this is after he's called the disciples, because we just talked about that in Luke chapter 5 and Luke chapter 6, right? Luke chapter 5, they meet the cost of discipleship. Luke chapter 6, he also calls them apostles because he knows they will go. This is 3 chapters later. And he says, he said unto another. So he is still recruiting. He's still recruiting disciples. And he says, follow me. But this particular one says, and he gives an excuse, he gives a reason why, and therefore he doesn't meet the cost of discipleship. He says, suffer me, in other words, permit me, first to go and bury my father. Jesus said to him, let the dead bury the dead. That sounds pretty rude and straightforward. But go thou and preach the gospel of the kingdom. Because see, you can tell now he's calling him to follow, but not just as a student, because he tells him, I want you to go and preach the kingdom. I want you to go, I want you to learn and go and apply. This is the mission I have set before you. And he says, I need to go first bury my father first. Why? Obviously, if you go and bury your father first, then his estate can be settled. Then he can get his inheritance. Then he can feel more financially secure about leaving everything and following. Because I got money in the bank and I got financial security. So what this particular verse is saying is this. Don't worry about your financial security before you respond to the call to go. Don't worry about whether or not you got the money to do it. Go do what I tell you to do. And, I know Jordan, I told you, just came back from a missions trip. Did she technically have the money to go when she signed up? Nope. Her and Caleb were in the midst of moving from one apartment to the other. They were in the midst of some other things that they had due, bills and everything. It wasn't the time for her to be leaving to go on a missions trip. But praise God, money came in and her entire mission trip was paid. But what I'm saying is this. She committed to go before she had the financial security to go. And God says, that's what I'm talking about. She didn't tell the church when they were asking who all feels led to go on this mission trip. She didn't say, well, can you wait until next month to let me tell you? Because I need to see whether or not we can swing it. Nope. That don't cut it. If God's calling you to go, you go. Don't worry about making sure the finances are there first. He will take care of that. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things, that included, will be added unto you. And another also said, he calls yet another person. Next, who else wants to join us? He says, I will follow thee, but let me first go bid them, my family, farewell, which are at home at my house. So what he's saying is, he says, I need to go and explain to them what I'm doing, and I need their approval. I need them to sign off on what I'm doing before I go. Jesus says the cost of discipleship is, that's not a factor. That's not a factor. And you'll see it when Jesus, right now in Matthew 10, he says, if you love father or mother, son or daughter more than me, you're not worthy of me. Elsewhere, as we're going to see, he says, if you're not willing to leave them for my name's sake, you're not worthy of me. You cannot be my disciple. In other words, you got to commit to go regardless of who's going to agree or disagree with you going. He calls you to go, you accept the call. Therefore, he comes to verse 62. And Jesus said unto him, and he's talking to all those around him too, no man having put his hand to the plow and looking back, for whatever reason, whatever excuse, is fit for the kingdom. That word fit is a different word. It's not axios. Axios was, you're not worthy. You don't balance the scales. You don't meet the cost of discipleship. This is totally different. This is the word fit. You are not fit for the kingdom. Fit is euthetos. E-U-T-H-E-T-O-S. It comes from the word eu, a prefix in Greek, EU, that we've adopted in English, and that's how we get eulogy and euphoria. Eu means well. So eulogy and the L-O-G-Y has to do with logos. You speak a good word. So at a funeral, you're given a eulogy. You're speaking well, giving a good word about the person who passed away. That's a eulogy. Euphoria, you got a well feeling. You're feeling good. You're feeling ecstatic. That's euphoria. So this is the word euantithemy. Tithemy is spelled tithe with M-I at the end. And it means to place, to set something down in a particular place, to put it in a particular place. So it simply means, put it together, it means well placed. He says, so if you say you're going to go and preach the kingdom, and you look back for any reason, then I can't place you. You can't be well placed. I can't fit you in. That's what it means. Well fit for placement. Serviceably fit. For use for God's intended purpose. And see, the difference is this. This euthetos, which is fit, versus axios, which is worthy. Euthetos is a functional fitness. It's practical usefulness. Just like a key fitting into a lock. It means like a utility. Like in baseball, you have what they call a utility player. The Braves have Mauricio Dubon. Right now he plays left field because that's where they need him to play. But he can play shortstop and has. He can play third base and has. He can play second base, first base. He can play most any position on the field. He's played center field. He can play right field. Right now they got him playing left field. He's a utility player. Why? He's serviceable. You can fit him in any position on the field. That's what they call a utility player. Some, you only play one position because of your size or lack of speed or because of your speed, whatever. But this guy can play anywhere. So he's a utility player. Well, that's what he's saying. I can plug you in anywhere. And furthermore, in that culture, and once again, I forgot to bring it. It's in the car and I forgot to bring it in. Because I used this illustration last night and I forgot to bring it in. Everybody here knows what a crescent wrench looks like, right? Everybody knows what we call channel lock pliers. Okay? Those adjustable pliers, right? Okay. Well, has anybody ever turned that channel lock pliers or that crescent wrench on the side and you used it to drive in a nail? Maybe you had a little bit of a nail sticking out and you're like, I don't know where the hammer is. And you grab that wrench and you just tap it back in. Okay, is that crescent wrench or those channel lock pliers designed to drive nails? No. A hammer is designed. It is functionally fit for the purpose of driving nails. But yet you've got something that's functionally fit to turn bolts, to grip and turn and loosen something. That's what it's functionally fit for. But how many people are functionally fit for one thing and they're doing another? You are functionally fit to play that grand piano. Well, if for whatever reason you're like, I'm just sick of playing it. I want to go do something else. So I'm going to go back here and run sound. Can you run the sound? Oh, yeah. But you're not functionally fit to run the sound. You're functionally fit to play that piano. But he says, I want to plug you into the kingdom. Every one of us have a place in the kingdom. Whether it's teaching a certain age group, playing a particular instrument, serving in a particular capacity, administrating in a particular area, he says, I have need of you in the kingdom. Not only in the church, because the kingdom's out there. He says, I've got a role for you. He says, but you got to meet the cost of discipleship. And from among disciples, you got to be willing to go. And if you're willing to go, pray with authority, speak with authority, minister with authority, then I can plug you in. I can find a place to plug you in where you fit perfectly. Say, for instance, you and your personality and your communication skills and your smile and your cordiality or whatever you want to call it. It may be that he says, okay, I want you to frequently go visit your mom, and I want to use you to minister to these other ladies in nursing home. Okay? Well, you're functionally fit to minister to people in a nursing home. And that may be where he says, out there, in the kingdom, out there. It doesn't mean you have to come here and form the nursing home ministry of Sandy Run, the Sandy Run Baptist Church nursing home ministry. Not necessarily. Because now you're getting religious with it. He says, I just want you fit for kingdom use. You don't need a title. You don't need a badge. All you need to do is go in my name. He says, but if you've got anything else holding you back, father, mother, and thank God you got a supportive husband, who doesn't have a problem with that? But if you've got anybody else holding you back, and you are apprehensive for that reason that you're turning around and looking at, he says, I can't plug you in. I can't fit you in. So you may as well just continue being a disciple. I can't use you out there because you got too many other priorities that determine whether or not you're going to commit to what I'm calling you to do. You got too many other things that determine whether or not you're going to be willing to go. So Luke 9:62 refers to such an inefficient tool when he says you are not fit. That crescent wrench is not fit for hammering nails. So if we say we got to put up sheetrock, don't come with a crescent wrench. No. If we've got to go fix the plumbing, don't bring a hammer. You go bust a pipe. Bring the crescent wrench. Okay, if we got a plumbing issue in the toilet or the bathroom and we got to fix a leaky valve, don't come bring a hammer. You go end up busting, you have water everywhere. Bring the crescent wrench. Bring the channel lock pliers. You bring the right tool for the right job. He says, but if you've got other priorities, then I can't use you. So how many believers do you know of, they make decent disciples, but they aren't fit for kingdom use? Because see, as a disciple who's called, you can serve in the church. And many do. They're serving in the church. But are they serving in the kingdom out there? Now, the church is part of serving in the kingdom. But are you fit for use out there? You got to be willing to go. So I can send you. Now, along those same lines in Luke 14:35. Now, we could go on and teach for an hour. We could just spend a whole Bible study teaching about salt. About we are salt. Just like we're the light of the world, we are a kingdom leaven, we are salt. And there are at least 7, 8, 9 perhaps different uses for salt back in that culture. So let's just go with the most common one that we understand. Salt is a flavor enhancer. Well, in Luke 14:35, it says salt is good. Even back in their culture, salt is good. But even if salt has become tasteless, it's lost its taste. Why, how could salt lose its taste? So if salt has lost its taste, with what will it be seasoned? With what will your food be seasoned? How you will season your food if the salt that you have has no taste to it? It is useless. That word useless is what we're talking about. King James says neither fit. It is not fit. It is not euthetos. It is not fit for the soil or even for the manure pile. It is to be thrown out. You don't even feed it to the animals. He says, let him who has ears to hear, let him hear. So you see where axios is a moral worthiness. You're not worthy of me because morally you're not willing to give up. Morally you're not willing to address issues in your life to balance the scales. That's axios. Ephesians 4:1, Paul says, walk in a manner worthy of your calling. Matthew 10, we talked about worthy of me. But see, that worthiness also has to do with, besides counterbalancing the scales, it was also the word used to describe the Roman emperor. Now, I'm not talking about the king here. We're talking about the one who's above the king, Caesar. See, you had Herod, who was the king in Galilee. But above him in Rome is Caesar. And that's the reason why they did colonization, is so when Caesar would come through and visit a colony, he would feel at home because it looked just like Rome. So when Caesar, the Roman emperor, would come through and he would march through with triumphal procession, they would ascribe to him, "You are worthy. Caesar, you are worthy of our applause. You are worthy of our support. You are worthy of our praise." That same context is used in Revelation 5:2. It says, "And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, 'Who is worthy to open the book and break the seals thereof?'" Jesus. Jesus is the only one worthy to open the book, the scroll, and break the seals thereof. Okay? Well, it's also used in Matthew 10, verses 10 through 15. He says, "For the worker is worthy of his support." He's talking about when he sends them out to go. This is the first time he commissioned his disciples in Matthew chapter 10, beginning in verse 7. This is the first time he calls them together and sends them out. He says, "Freely you receive, freely give. Go preach the kingdom." Okay? In that context, he says, when you go into these other villages, whatever city or village you enter, inquire. Now that word inquire means ascertain and by thorough questioning. You're going to give a survey test questions. You're going to find out who is worthy. Who in this village is worthy of what we have to say? Okay? It's the same word that's used for, he says, "Go and search diligently for the child." Whenever we're talking about Herod told the wise men to go search diligently, he says, "I want you to go into community and I want you to search diligently for whoever is worthy." Axios. Who is deserving of this kingdom message? Who's willing to hear it? Who's willing to hear it? And he says, you find somebody, stay at his house until you leave that city. As you enter the house, give it your greeting. If the house is worthy, give it your blessing of peace. Whoever does not receive you nor heed your words, as you go out of that city, shake the dust off your feet. Truly I say to you, it will be more tolerable for Sodom and Gomorrah than it will be for them, because they rejected the kingdom. Now, we've taught on that in a different context. The context we're talking about here is looking for who is worthy. You want me to give you a practical example of what I'm talking about here? And I'm not being judgmental. I don't mean to be. It may sound that way. And I don't mean to be rude or crude or obnoxious. But there are those of you who are in here that whenever you cannot be here, you will say, "Okay, I'll see it online the next day." And I feel sure you do. Okay, well, there are those who may not be as YouTube savvy or may not have a YouTube account or may not have social media, for whatever reason, they just don't mess with all that. Well, they may attend a different Bible study, and I have them on our Thursday night Bible study. And they'll say, "I can't be there because I got a doctor's appointment at 3:30, 4 o'clock. It's in Charleston, and we're probably not going to be back in time because of traffic and everything." And they will say, "Will you send me the video?" And whereas y'all will automatically see it online, because they don't necessarily have access to that, then they're asking me to send them the video. So I do. So all they got to do is in that text message, pull it up and play the Bible study so they didn't miss. Okay, my point is this. I deem them because they're faithful as y'all. If any of y'all asked me to do it, I would do it for you. If any of y'all said, "Hey, I can't be here next week, will you record it for me and send it to me?" I would send it to you. As soon as I got it edited, got the file compressed, I would send it to you as I do them. Why? Because you're worthy of it. Because part of that worthiness is a hunger. You want to learn. Okay. Am I going to go home tonight and go down the roll of all those who once upon a time used to be a part of this Wednesday night Bible study, or those I know who attend here that I happen to have their phone number? Am I going to go home and just start sending it out widespread to everybody? Nope. Because they don't want to know, or else they'd be here. But for those of you who are faithful and indicate you want to be here, as far as the kingdom is concerned, I got to do what Jesus would do. I got to do what Jesus instructed his disciples to do. Find those who are worthy and share it with them. And for those who aren't worthy, shake the dust off your feet. Don't worry about it. That's their loss. Okay? But that's the whole point of what I'm getting at. Is for you who want to know, we will make the effort to get the lesson to you. But I'm not going to chase people down. That's what he says. You go around and you find those who are worthy of the kingdom teaching. And you find them they're worthy, you settle down and you teach them. But for those who aren't worthy, don't worry about it. Go about your business. Last thing, and we'll hush. We talked about in Matthew chapter 10 last week, we talked about whoever chooses or prefers father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Chooses son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He will elaborate and include sisters and brothers in other verses. Is not worthy of me. Okay? Luke 9:62. Whoever says, I will follow the kingdom and turns and look back, they're not fit. Do we realize the reason why people do that? It's the fear of man. It's the fear of man. The fear of man and what somebody else will think about the decision I'm making to follow. The decision I'm making to be a disciple. The decision I'm making to apostolically be sent and go. The fear of man is more worried about what they're going to think. And it could be father or mother. It could be son or daughter. It could be sister or brother. It could be co-worker. The fear of man. Do we understand that the fear of man is the source of denial? It was for Peter. He denied Jesus not once, not twice, but 3 times because he was fearing what they would think. He was fearing what would happen if he admitted to being Jesus' disciple. The fear of man, and remember we said denial, or to deny. First of all, it means to contradict. Second of all, it means to disregard in the second stage. And in the third stage, it means to denounce. So, what is the root of denial? It is the fear of man. And he says later on, if you deny me before men, well, he says that in Matthew 10:33. If you deny me before men, I'll deny you before my Father. If you hesitate or apprehensive about doing what I'm calling you to do out of the fear of man, that is denying me. And I will deny you before my Father. It's the cost of discipleship. It's the willingness to be sent. It increases just like it did for that student of ours. To be able to graduate early from high school, to be able to go into the military, be chosen to go to West Point, and now a major. It is, you graduate and we grow. We grow in rank, so to speak, I guess you could say. In worthiness. In being more and more fit for the kingdom. And he says, that's who I'm looking for.